Hey everybody, it's Mike Sherwood and welcome to my channel, Don't Waste Your Life. I remind you to be present, to be happy, and to be thankful. If you're new to the channel, I ask you to subscribe, and if you're returning, thanks for coming back. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the Biden bailout that recently has hit the news that President Biden is going to forgive loans of up to $10,000 and for Pell Grants up to $20,000. This is a very controversial topic, and again, all this stuff that's contained in this discussion is my opinion. And I think that's what's wonderful about the US is that I can share my opinion, you can share your opinion, and that we both can be heard. And so I'm planning to share my thoughts on what I feel about this. And this video is actually in response to a lot of people reached out to me after I recently posted on Facebook about what my thoughts were about the bailout in this case. And a lot of people were kind of surprised at my comments, considering I had student loans and I tend to be more moderate. I tend to be more in the middle as far as where I lean. And so some people, commented on what my post was. Some people reached out to me individually. Some people actually I was talking to them in conversations and we were exchanging different ideas. And I like to have these discussions with different people. And I'm not going to, yell at people and get into fights with people because there are people out there. And so the reason why I'm putting this video together is in response to that, because there's just too many people that have kind of reached out to me and I just can't respond to all of them. So I'm putting this together. Also, to a little bit to some degree to depersonalize it, because a lot of these people are out there are also my friends. And, I respect their opinion. I respect what they're doing. I don't want to make it into like a, shouting match or, a heated discussion. I'm not the type of person. I'd rather just kind of, share what my thoughts are. If you want to listen, great. If you don't want to listen, that's okay too. That's what's great about America is everybody can share what they want. President Biden is built this program that's going to cost about $300 billion. So to put this into perspective, in 2007, we had about 500 billion in student loans that were held by the government. And as of 2022, we're at about $1.6 trillion. So everybody's looking at this and probably saying this is a drop in the bucket. We should probably do more loan forgiveness. And I'll get to that. I'll actually talk a little bit more about the makeup of the loans. And I think that's quite interesting to see how those are made up. So I'm going to read something here. Per BBC, 16% of debtors represent over half the total debt, with these folk averaging about $60,000 in loans. So again, $10,000 sounds like a drop in the bucket. So these are the people that are medical professionals, lawyers. So their loan amounts are very, very high. 200,000 plus, 300,000 plus for some of these. There's a lot of people that have this kind of debt. So $10,000 doesn't seem that much, but the median amount is around 17,000. So there's a good majority of people out there that by giving $10,000, it's going to wipe out their loan or it's going to put a pretty big dent in it and really free them up. I can agree with that. It's definitely I think it's going to help people. And, personally, I know a lot of people that are very excited about this because this is like a windfall for them. And it's really helpful to them. And, the idea is that this should create more demand and more spending, but there's some other stuff and we'll talk about that. So one other thing to note with this is for undergraduate loans only. You cannot use this for graduate programs. What will the impact of all this be? Nobody really knows right yet because a lot of the economists are talking and they believe it could create some inflation. It could increase the prices of tuition just because now universities are looking at this and they're saying, oh, great, well, if they can get a bailout, then we can raise the prices. And in fact, I actually see some memes going around the internet saying, "Oh, hey, Biden gave me $10,000. Well, we're going to raise our tuition." It's kind of like the same thing with the electronic vehicles with the credits. Oh, hey, battery prices went up $7,500 to kind of offset the credit for the electronic vehicles. Again, it's a joke, but still kind of funny. So if you look at the history of some of these bailouts, going back historically, you had AIG, you had the airline industry, you had the automotive, you had Citigroup. I mean, there's a bunch of banks that got bailed out. And then you also had the payment protection program for small businesses. And now you have the student loan bailout. So you have all these different bailouts that are happening. At the end of the day, who pays for all this? Where does all this money come from? This comes from taxpayers. So in some way, shape, or form, taxpayers are going to pay for this. There's no there's no getting around that. When everybody says, "Hey, this is great," and we're forgiving, we're helping people, I get it. Yeah, we're helping people, but then we're also reburdening that to all the other people as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. I mean, where else are you going to get that from? It's got to be taxpayers are going to pay for it. There's a cost with that. What is this going to result in? Taxpayers, taxes are going to go up, or it's going to have to be paid by printing more money. Inflation is going to happen. So there's a lot of different things can happen with this. I think the challenge I have with this is that I feel like we're encouraging bad behavior. It's, hey, if you go do something risky or you decide to do something that might not quite work, well, the government will just bail you out. And again, as I talked about with the payment protection plan or payment protection program, I actually participated in it. But again, it's one of those things that just because I participate in it doesn't mean that like I agree with it. It's like some of the people I talk about with student loans, they're happy that their student loans are getting forgiven for part of them, but they're also like, I know what the long-term effect of this is. And so that's what I would just say is like the way I think about this program is that we're not treating the root of the problem. We're treating a symptom of the overall larger problem. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, like some of the main issues that I see, but it's kind of like in medicine even, and especially in like US medicine versus like Asian countries where they treat things a little bit more naturally with medicine. US medicine usually is like, hey, here's a pill, we're going to treat the symptom. I don't like that. That's not what we should be doing. So it's the same thing here, is that we're treating the symptom of the problem, and we're going to say, hey, we're going to give you some money, or we're going to forgive or bail you out. I don't agree with that. That's not a good plan. That's not a good plan. My recommendation would be is that we need to find ways to make systemic changes to get to the root of the problem, to change behaviors over time. And again, like I said, this is not an easy thing to accomplish. I was talking about the payment protection program. So far, since the beginning of that program, and if anybody don't know what that program is, it was basically focused around small businesses to help them to stay in business and be able to keep people on payroll. The idea is not to lay people off. There was massive amounts of loopholes and abuse. Estimates right now are around 20 billion of fraud so far. I mean, I'm sure there's more than that they just don't know about. The total program will cost taxpayers around $953 billion. That's a lot of money. And again, that's much larger than what we're talking about with the student loan bailout. But it's the same principle again, as I talked about, is that we're creating bad incentives and bad behaviors. So you might be asking me, well, Mike, don't you believe that everybody should have the right to have a good education? Yes, I think that they should. And I think it should be affordable, or there should be some programs that are set up to be able to help people that truly need it, and that truly need financials to, financial help to be able to get the education that they desire. Again, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a policy and program expert, and I'm not going to pretend to be. I do think that people should have an education. Now, should it be that the government should completely provide it? I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I would just say, from what I see with the government doing anything at a massive scale, usually there's a lot of bloat, there's a lot of issues, and it just usually is not as effective. And again, like I said, I do believe that people should have the right to a good education. How that is implemented, I don't have an answer. I would love to hear what other people think about that. In addition, you might ask, well, Mike, do you believe that costs for college is out of control? 100% it's out of control. I'll show some data later where it is ridiculous, the cost of college. I think back to when I went to college. When I went to college, it cost me about $35,000 a year, which sounds like a lot. And it was a private school, and it was a lot of money then. And it's still a lot of money now. That college now is $85,000 a year. I can tell you right now, if I was going to that college now, I would not be going there because it's ridiculously out of control. I definitely think that there's a major issue with the cost of college, how it's matched up with inflation and other stuff. It's out of control. Do I think people need help and or should they be accountable for what they decide to do of like the financial decisions that they make? Yes and no. I think we need to find ways to better equip young adults and people to figure out programs and different things that can create living wages for them in a going forward basis. I just think that education at the high school level and even like a continuing on basis or even like community programs, we don't do a really good job of like helping people understand these financial decisions. And so they enter into these financial decisions lightly and they get smacked upside the head or they don't realize what it's truly going to cost at the end. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Below are some of my top items that I see that where there's concerns as far as education, the cost of education, and just this loan bailout. So I'll talk through the five or six items that I see that we need to change in some way, shape, or form. Again, as I mentioned, I don't have all the answers. I'm just pointing out what I see. In addition, I will also go through some of my top tips on what I advise for juniors, seniors, and people that are in college. Like, what should they do to try to help themselves financially be set up for success as they, finish their college or they choose a college. So we'll go through that. Number one, costs are out of control. So I will show a graph here where you can see some of the costs over time. And as you could see, you see inflation, you see some of the other buckets of goods, and then you see tuition for school. It is just out of control. There is no other way to say it. Has not kept up with wages, has not kept up with anything. It's become so expensive. And I can't prove this, but I'm sure somebody out there is doing a study. But I believe a lot of this has to do with the prevalence of people now going to college versus years ago they did not. Federalization of student loans. I mean, that was something that I believe it happened. It started to happen in the 50s, but it became super popularized in the 80s and 90s. And if you look where we started to see the most of the growth, it's 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where we saw a lot of the costs. The costs are out of control. Really what it is nobody's holding these institutions accountable for what they're doing. I mean, it's just becoming bloated. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a later issue where I see this, but yeah, the cost for education is not reasonable. Number two, the students have become the product. In the past, the institution was focused on their reputation and what the value that they're providing for the community. But now it's almost like they've kind of churned out these students. So these students have become the product and they've been protected and coddled and cared for. And these institutions are doing whatever they can to recruit students, bring them in, and they have amenities like gymnasiums, they have movie theaters, they have all kinds of different things, and it's all about the experience. And don't get me wrong, college is a great experience, and so I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I would just say that you have become the product. And what's actually happening in many cases is they're marginalizing the college experience by actually, I don't want to say dumbing down like what they're teaching, but what they're trying to do is they're actually, in some cases, and again, I don't have proof of this. I've only heard this anecdotally from a lot of other people where they talk about, leveling up grades. And what I mean by that is that they're increasing the grades in order to make the student feel good, their parents feel good about spending the money because I mean, if you think about it, you follow the money. So this goes back to Jim Mahar's and Jim, I know we haven't talked in many years, but one of the things that I learned from you in my MBA class at St. Bonaventure was the nexus of contracts. And I always come back to that. And I always think about following the money. Think about it this way. You have these teachers that are going to be paying all this money. They want their students, they want their kids to do well. So if you follow all that, these students have to do well. And if they don't do well, they're going to pull their kids out. And so the student is the product and they really are controlling. And in fact, I've even heard from many people that they've left academia because the students hold so much power now that they feel like they can't do their job effectively because they have to be careful about how they deal with these students and how they deal with the the gravy train, so to speak. So I think that's quite interesting to see that dynamic change. But what I will say is that this is actually diluting the valuation of these institutions and what they provide. And it's almost like printing out degrees. And in many cases, I find this is creating bad habits where students are getting out of these colleges and they're just lazy. They aren't willing to work hard, the work ethic. And I'm not just blaming that all on the institutions. I'm not saying that's everything caused by them. Some of it's just the students, but it's perpetuating it, it's moving that forward and causing that to continue to occur. And one thing I will say with this is that just because you're successful in college does not mean it's going to translate to the real world and you're going to be successful. And that as some of the business leaders that I see out there, some of those business leaders are very successful. They have no college and they've done very well, and they just have naturally learned that over time, those skills over time. I think the other problem that's related to this, there's just so much focus on marketing and showing the numbers. So I remember when I went to college, they told me, hey, when you get out of college, you're going to be making $85,000 a year. And I thought that was great. I was like, wow, this is spectacular. I'm spending this much and I'm going to get this much. The problem is like those numbers didn't translate. I made $31,000 a year. I made nothing when I got out of college. And so I was a bit disappointed. And I've heard that from other people that has happened to them as well. And so nobody's really holding these institutions accountable for the claims that they're making and for what they're giving and what they're helping people. I think the third thing is not teaching young people about finances. So college is a huge financial decision, and I just feel like we're not equipping people to be ready for that. I feel at the high school level, maybe at the sophomore, junior, senior level, we should have classes that are teaching basic budgeting, teaching credit, teaching about loans, teaching about building a business case. I actually think building a business case is one of the most important skills that anybody can learn, because I even look at college as you need to build a business case to do that. And I just don't think that we do that, because if you think about it this way, if you're going to spend $125,000 and you're going to get out making $30,000 a year, how long is it going to take for a payback? It's simple math that you can use to calculate that. And what opportunities is that potentially going to open up? And if you're not able to do that kind of stuff, and you could also find out that you hate that job. So that's the other thing is we also need to give our young people the ability to shadow and see other jobs, and we don't have that right now. I think the fourth thing is that there are other jobs out there that you can do that do not require you to go to college, but the problem is they're stigmatized as blue collar or less than ideal jobs. There's jobs out there being like a master plumber or a master electrician. I mean, there's some people I know that make upwards of $200,000 a year. They work pretty comfortably, and they make a very good living, and they have no debt. They have no debt. Did they have to work their way up? Yes, just like anybody else. But we aren't popularizing these kind of programs at all, because people kind of think it's beneath them. But again, I know many people that are in these professions. They do very well, and they provide very well for their family, and their work-life balance is very good. Number five is that getting a degree does not necessarily translate to success. Just because you get a degree doesn't mean you're actually going to be successful. There's people who get 2 years degrees, 4 years degrees, and those degrees don't guarantee that you're going to get a job. And in fact, in many cases, like the MBA and the master's degree have kind of become the new minimum standard. And so some jobs are kind of paywalled, almost like your apps, or almost behind those kinds of requirements. And if you don't have that and you apply for it, they won't even consider you. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that are happening that you may not be aware of. And so just because you have that degree doesn't mean you're going to get it. And it's also very important to understand, depending upon what degree you're going for, what you get can have a big impact on. So in particular, I know a guy that actually went to the same college as me, graduated with a very similar degree to me. And when he got out of college, he just couldn't find a job. And it's not that he wasn't competent and he wasn't smart. He was very smart, very, very smart. But he didn't know how to market himself. And he was kind of focused on a particular niche that ended up getting outsourced for pennies on the dollar, overseas. And he didn't really adapt himself. He didn't really change the way he was doing things. He didn't update his skills to be considered, continue to be considered marketable. He did not do that. And he struggles for a job till this day. And so I have some other friends that end up working at Starbucks or other retail locations. Not saying that those are bad, but in those cases, you are underemployed. You spent a ton of money and you're not using your degree. So, and some of them, they went for liberal arts. And again, I'm not saying liberal arts are bad. I think a lot of it's, making the best of the opportunity that is given to you. So, like if you get a scholarship or not scholarship, you get a internship, you should take advantage of it and you should try to find a way to get in, even if you have to work for free. You're looking to gain that experience. That's what you're. The last thing is related to the colleges in particular is that the relationship is very transactional. So it's basically saying, hey, college, if I pay you this amount of money, I'm going to get this degree, which hopefully is going to open up X doors. So in some cases, you'll have it where the teachers they just don't care, but they're also very careful because if they care too much and they want to help, and then like the student isn't doing well, then again, like I was talking about the gravy train, like the incentives are kind of misaligned, and so what I notice is that the relationships have become very transactional. It's like, hey, if I give you this, you're going to give me this. And that's kind of like what it is. It's not relational, it's not helping you grow. One thing I pride in, I really loved about RIT, I don't know how it is now, but they wanted to make me a good, well rounded individual. And I felt like they were successful in that. And I don't know what they're teaching now, but I felt that that was very beneficial to helping me become the best person that I could be, not just a very technical minded person, but also other skills that would go along. So, what do I recommend to the junior or senior that's in high school or somebody that's early on in your college journey? You're really trying to figure out what you're going to do for the next 40 years. And I mean, honestly, that could change over time. You just really don't know. So, I'm going to try to give you some tips that I would look at in order to try to help you with this. So, number one is apply for FAFSA and apply for scholarships. And every quarter when you're in college, always appeal financial aid. So when I was at RIT, every quarter I always appeal my financial aid to get as much as I could. And when I did that, I got thousands of more dollars just by doing that. And so that kept my student loans low as it could be. I mean, I still had student loans, but that helps a lot. So you have to be willing to put in the work. So if you're willing to put in the work, you can get some more dollars that way. Two is talk to your guidance counselors, both at college and at high school. Be careful though. Talk about them about what tools and what things that they can help you with to understand what your aptitudes, what you're good at. I would suggest also finding some mentors or family members to understand, have them help you reflect back on what you're good at and what you could be interested in. I think a lot of people really understand that. It's better it comes from somebody else than not you. Number three is to try to find a shadowing opportunity, whether that's you taking on an internship or finding somebody that is, doing something that you're interested in. Try to talk to the college, see if they can find somebody who's been placed by their program and see what they've been doing. Maybe if they have 3 to 5 years of experience, because then that's really going to give you a real glimpse in like what you're going to be doing when you graduate from their program if you're doing something similar. That's what I would do is those shadowing opportunities, you may find that you actually are not interested in doing that thing. So it's very important. Another thing you can do is consider doing a 2 year school while you're at home, or you can rent with a bunch of friends. Find a way to make it as cheap as possible. Go to a public school because you usually have general education requirements that you need to do as part of your degree. That's just a requirement, and then you could transfer to another school. This can be done very cheaply. This also buys you time to figure out what the heck you want to do. So there's a lot of advantages to this. Number five is don't fall for what your friends are doing. Don't look at what they're doing and decide and make decisions that are related to your life based on what your friends are doing. One thing I will say is that your friends that are there then and now, many of them will be your acquaintances in the future. They may not be somebody that you're is in close contact with. And so if you decide to make decisions for your entire life based on somebody else, you're the one that's paying for it, not them. So just keep that in mind. It's ultimately about you. And I'm not trying to make it sound so selfish, but you need to figure out what you want, not what XYZ person wants and likes to do. Even if it's something that they like to do, you may hate it. So keep that in mind. Make it about you. College experience is your personal experience. Number six is to work while you're doing school, whether that's high school or college. I think having a summer job or having a night job is very important to helping you to balance your life over time. One of the things I would say about college is that, and even high school, you have to be able to balance multiple things, not just getting the degree, is important, but also I believe going to college helps you balance multiple things and multiple priorities over time. So it's very important that you're able to do this. I hear you. You may be saying, well, I'm not going to have time to party. I'm not going to have time to date. Trust me, you will have time. You get actually very good. You will optimize for time you will optimize for time over time, and you will get much better at it. Number 7 is keep costs as low as possible. If you have to like live at home, do it. If you can do that, that is amazing. You will save. In my case, I would have saved $30,000 to $60,000 just from doing that. You can commute in and still get a very similar experience. I mean, you can meet friends that are on campus. You can still have that very similar experience. Or if it makes more sense to live on campus or off campus because it's cheaper, find a way to optimize for that money because I'm telling you that will add up so much over time. Number 8, the last one. Consider doing school part time and working a full time job, or doing a slightly less than full time load and doing a full time job. When you do this, you can actually be able to balance both. I'm telling you, you can do it. I've done it. It is totally possible. You just got to be willing to sacrifice and be very good at your time management. And the amazing thing about this, if you do this right, and like let's say you're living at home, you could work both part time and be able to go to school full or part time. You could have no student loans when you graduate. You could also save up for a house. I had a friend of mine that did this. He stayed at home. He had no student loans when he graduated, and he had enough money to put a down payment on his house just because he stayed at home. And I know you may be saying, well, that's not cool. I don't want to stay with my parents. I'm telling you, that will set you up for success in your 20s, 30s, and into the future. It's totally worth it. It may not seem like at the time, but I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. So with that said, this is, the summary that I kind of put together to talk about how I feel about this student loan bailout. And like I said, I mean, the great thing about being in the US is I can say whatever I want. You can say and believe whatever you want. And I don't want to say we're both right, but we're both entitled to our opinion. And so I'm hoping that somebody will get some value out of this. It'll be helpful for somebody, whether they are looking for some practical tips, or you want to talk about some of the problems that I see. I mean, I definitely think there are some things we could do, and like I said, I don't have the answers. I'm not going to pretend I have the answers. I know there's a lot of people out there that they believe that they're experts. Even what I'm saying here, I have incomplete information. It's not going to be totally right, but this is what I believe is right. And I'd love to have a discussion. I'd love to understand what other people are thinking. And, at the end of the day, I'm very happy for the people that are going to benefit vastly from this program personally, especially people I know. Um, but like from a overall perspective on the cost of it, I don't like it because it's spending money in a way that I don't think is beneficial and it's creating bad habits. So with that, take care, guys.